Booga booga.
The Shadow is a hidden gem among forgotten films, being one of the first modern superhero movies released just 2 years after Tim Burton's Batman Returns. I won't spoil the entire film because I really want you guys to watch it and let me know what you think. I'm sure the overall concept will sound familiar to you. A wealthy playboy uses his darker side to instill fear in the criminal underworld. Starring Alec Baldwin before he was controversial, this movie continued the dark superhero genre and took it down what I would consider an even darker path, focusing on the violent and corrupt past of the main character as he atones for his sins by weeding out crime in a post-World War I New York. The acting at times can be hammy, but in some ways that makes it endearing, harkening back to the times of Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. But there are also just solid performances that easily meet today's standards, with great acting from a star-studded cast featuring John Lone, Penelope Ann Miller, Peter Boyle, Ian McKellen, and Tim Curry. I do want to give a massive shout out to John Lone in particular, who played the villain of the film, Shiwan Khan. First of all, the creepy hypnotic stare he gives when he's first introduced is so unsettlingly wonderful, but it's also the simple understated nature of the delivery of his lines. He never feels unreal, even when he's casually talking about annihilating a city of people or washing his hands in blood. And on a dime, he can turn from being a total savage to being a very charming man about town.
The entire world would hear my roar and willingly fall subject to the lost empire of Shankain.
That is a lovely tie, by the way.
But moving on, the visual effects also hold up relatively well. While I won't say this is the first film to do this, this has one of the first Invisible Man fight scenes put to film. I have a particular soft spot for this because it's done practically with a very devoted stuntman. And if you're a fan of the film noir genre, you'll see the obvious odes, with the story essentially taking the gumshoe motif and blowing it up on a fantastic scale. Even some of the shots are reminiscent of Golden Age filmmaking. The music by Jerry Goldsmith is also a marvel, providing listeners with a unique sound that perfectly encapsulates the dark and dingy world the film surrounds itself with. And although the two films were done by different composers, don't be surprised to get a Hellboy vibe from this movie's soundtrack. But while all that may sound nice, the film ultimately bombed at the box office, making only $48 million worldwide on a budget of $40 million. I can only theorize about what the issues were. In one point, I honestly don't think that the critics of the time were paying attention, with some saying the film lacked a certain visceral appeal, or that it was simply bejeweled trash. Based on how poorly it did, it would be easy to take what the critics said and assume they were correct. Personally, I think this film was ahead of its time, highlighting fears of WMDs being used on the American populace. Remember, this movie came out only 5 years after the Cold War ended, where the threat of nuclear annihilation was pervasive. And while the story follows the aftermath of World War I, there are themes of disillusionment with the United States Armed Forces and turning to drugs for both escape and profit, similar to what was particularly prevalent during and after the Vietnam War. Of course, the film is not without its flaws, at times falling to goofy, almost slapstick comedy. There are also anachronisms within the film, especially at the beginning. One debated aspect is the ending, which decides to go with a slightly more cerebral approach as opposed to a bombastic action sequence. Had this film been released today, there would no doubt be a knuckle-dragging fight and a whole lot more blood. But while certain changes could be made to the final confrontation, overall, I have a preference to the slower climax that ultimately shows the hero's mastery over his darker self, in some way coming to terms with his past. While I won't say The Shadow is an objectively good movie, it is, at the very least, a fun movie, diving into timely concepts of morality and mortality long before Iron Man made the leap to the big screen. I encourage anyone to take an hour and a half of their life and watch this flick. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button and leave a comment below. And as always, please subscribe.
Booga booga.